Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Monday, April 29th, 2013, start of a brand new week of utter insanity, courtesy of the United States government and the corporate media. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Manny is sitting in our control room as always, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in with your concerns here. I'm looking at the corporate media this morning. They're still hammering Boston Muslim as hard as they can, but I think they realize the audience is starting to tune out. The overnight numbers are actually starting to decline, so now they're starting to pretend like they're reporting other news here. And they just got done doing one about how the Little League is honoring the 8-year-old victim. There's just any excuse to keep Boston and Muslims in your eye. But they're finally having to go out and act like they're covering other news. So, of course, what are they talking about? The Michael Jackson family lawsuit, and it will run to billions of dollars. Well, good for the Jacksons. How does that affect my life? How does it affect your life? Remember Rivero's rule of news. If it doesn't affect you and your life, it isn't news, it's advertising. It's fluff. It's distraction. Over at MSNBC, they're going on about how climate change is affecting the coastlines. Look at any historical geologic map. Coastlines do change all the time. And it's not just climate change. Continental drift has something to do with that. Earthquakes have something to do with that. Tsunamis have something to do with it. They're just out there pounding that whole global warming thing again. It really is just all junk. Now, the good news is we are seeing the corporate media start to respond to the independent media regarding Boston. And we started seeing that last week with Rachel Maddow, who was out there saying, oh, there's no such thing as a false flag attack. And anyway, how can you dare question the official story? And so we're seeing over at News with Views where they're commenting on the fact that we're seeing all of these stories appear in the corporate media about irresponsible, disgusting conspiracy theories, and the corporate media is tearing their hair and pounding their chest saying, why, oh why, whenever anything gets reported on the news, are all these people out there asking questions about the official story? Well, it's because you lie to us about pretty much everything. Going all the way back to that giant whopper about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction. It is healthy to doubt the official story. A skeptical people is a free people, and that skepticism is deserved. If the U.S. government and the corporate media are dealing with a credibility crisis, it is of their own making. And now they're wailing and moaning and, oh, nobody believes us anymore. Well, we have good reason to. We've been lied to, and we know we've been lied to. And there's no law in the country that says you have to believe the official story about anything. And you shouldn't believe the official story. You shouldn't believe anything. Belief is a device to get you to act as if something is true, even when it is not. Beliefs are part of your slave chains, and it is time to break free. But we're seeing the corporate media now responding to it. They're reacting to the independent media, which means they've lost the initiative. They've lost control of the narrative. Now they're trying to go back and patch over the holes in the story and say, oh, here's the new updated version of why it all looked like this. And I think one of the biggest embarrassments they're dealing with right now was that supposed piece of the 9/11 landing gear that was found in an alley right next to the wall of a mosque. Remember last week, and we were saying, oh, come on, this is just too obvious. Well, there's been a development in that story. When we come back from these commercials, I will give you the gritty details. Yes, it was another fraud. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And last week, in the middle of Boston Muslim, it was reported that a fragment of the landing gear from one of the airplanes that crashed into the World Trade Towers was found wedged in this very narrow space right next to where the Ground Zero Mosque is still being argued over. And the idea that the news coverage kept hitting that point, mosque, it's found next to the mosque, 9/11 mosque, 9/11 mosque, Muslims, still trying to sell you that linkage. And they even did a story about the guy who found it, and, you know, what a you know, what a hero he is for finding this thing, and how he says it's a piece of a murder weapon, and they're talking about putting it in the September 11th Memorial Museum. But there is a problem. Because on the very first photo, the release of this debris, you can see a piece of rope tied around it. And I happen to know, because I asked a Boeing engineer, they don't use rope on the landing gear of the Boeing 757. Plus, there are no gouges or anything on those walls from where it supposedly tumbled down from overhead. So the New York City police are investigating whether this is a hoax, possibly planted by the opponents to the proposed Ground Zero mosque. And they're actually investigating. And it's another piece of propaganda. And it is a reminder that there is a group of people out there who think lying, cheating, stealing, fraud, and deception are perfectly acceptable as long as it gets them what they want. But we saved and reposted the first photo of this supposed piece of landing gear wedged between these two walls. The rope is still tied around there. Apparently, after they lowered it, they couldn't get the rope off. They just cut it. But Boeing does not use rope on the landing gear of the 757. Very obviously, this is somebody's idea of a joke. And the corporate media is still... And by the way, I had to go to the British press to find out about the rope and the New York police investigation. It's not being reported in the American media. They're out there, oh, it's a murder weapon. We've got to enshrine it and honor it and make everybody believe the official story. Now, there's an interesting video over at YouTube, one of many until YouTube starts to take them down. These are videos of the residents of Watertown who had to go through this shelter-in-place lockdown, police coming in, and it undermines this idea that the people of Watertown were perfectly happy to go through all of this because they got the gosh darn terror suspect. But when you actually see these interviews by the people of Watertown, they are very unhappy. They're talking about forceful intrusion. They were not given the option whether or not they wanted the police to come into their home without a warrant, merely as part of a sweep. Apparently, these military forces were causing property damage, for which the homeowners or tenants are not going to be reimbursed. These guys were in there looking for the terrorists and just knocking stuff over and breaking stuff, and they're saying, sorry, citizen, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. They're very, very angry about this. Now, I want to clear up something, because over the weekend there was some confusion. What are we talking about with Boston? You know, was it staged? Was it faked? Was there a real bomb? And the answer is there were both. There was a bomb drill. That has pretty much been confirmed. And when you have a disaster drill, there are always disaster actors with makeup and fake injuries and bandages for the ambulance crews and fire crews to work with. Otherwise, what's the point of having the drill? Oh, we're having a bomb disaster drill. There's no bomb, there's no victims. They just stand around eating donuts and drinking coffee. So there were actors playing victims with phony blood and throwing dust around, making it look really good for the media cameras. The scandal here is that many of the photos of Boston bombing victims that you were shown by the corporate media were the actors presented as real victims to make it look like it was a much more serious crime than actually was. But at the same time, yes, there was a real bomb that really did kill and wound a lot of people. Funny how these acts of terror just show up right in the middle of drills simulating these acts of terror. But that's the reason for the confusion and why there's so much evidence of fraud and deception. There was a drill, and the drill had fake actors. If you go over to FEMA's own website, there's a page of guidelines for the actors who participate in the drills, what to wear, what to bring with you, what to expect to be supplied on the scene. I went through one of these when I was a student at Cal State Fullerton in the theater department. They had one of these drills, and they came around to the theater departments and said, we need you all to come out and be actors and pretend to be maimed and killed and so forth. And we did, and it was a nice way to have fun, and we got class credit for it. But that's how these drills get done. They do have actors. The scandal here is the corporate media was taking pictures of the drill actors and presenting them as real victims. Now, over in Russia, apparently they have caught up with and killed 2 CIA-linked terrorists that Russia says are tied to the Boston bombing suspect Tamerlan Tsarnaev. And remember, we already revealed this uncle that's getting all the media play saying, oh, they were radicalized, they were dangerous, even though in his first interview he admitted he'd hardly ever talked to them. Turns out he is married to the wife of a CIA official. So this thing is already blowing up to be a huge, huge false flag. And I'm not surprised the corporate media is out there saying, oh, why won't they believe us? Please, please, please. Now, amazingly enough, following the Boston bombing, and you see this after every single false flag terror attack, they'll run polls to see if it really worked. Are Americans willing to give up more of their constitutional rights for the illusion of safety? And apparently this time the polls ran into an absolute brick wall. The overwhelming response of the American people is no. We will not give up any more of our constitutional rights for this illusion of safety. And it is an illusion. When the government is causing these acts of terror, there is no safety. Even if you accept the Boston bombing story at face value, and very few seem to be doing precisely that, it sends a message that all of this Department of Homeland Security and FBI and TSA and crotch groping and luggage looting and cancer scanners didn't work. We're already seeing all of this, the wailing in Washington, D.C. about, oh, it was intelligence failures allowed this to happen. Exactly the same thing they said after 9/11. They have soaked the American people for trillions of dollars for the security industrial complex, and if you accept the Boston bombing story at face value, it didn't work. So they're out there saying, oh, there were intelligence failures, we must do better, which is basically saying we're going to take more of your money and more of your rights and subject you to even more intrusive searches and surveillance. But we know that that can never really work. They could have us all locked in 10 by 10 cells under constant 24-hour surveillance, and when the government needs another false flag attack, they'll come up with a way to do it. But the gist of this whole situation is right now Americans are far more afraid of the U.S. government than they are of terror. We ran a poll on our website earlier today. Which are you most afraid of, U.S. government or terrorists? U.S. government got 99%. Terrorists got 1%. Total of 5 votes as of the last time I looked, which I presume are those COINTELPRO, Mockingbird, whatevers that are monitoring my site for dangerous, subversive information here. Now, let's put this all in perspective. Everyone said, oh, be afraid of terror, be afraid of terror, be afraid of terror. 3 weeks ago, it was be afraid of guns. Now it's be afraid of terror. You are 17,600 times more likely to die from heart disease than from a terrorist. You are 12,571 times more likely to die from cancer than from a terrorist. You are 11,000 times more likely to die in an airplane accident than from a terrorist plot involving an airplane. You are 1,048 times more likely to die in a car accident than from a terrorist attack. You are 404 times more likely to die simply falling off something than from a terrorist attack. You are 87 times more likely to drown than die in a terrorist attack. And it goes on and on. You are 12 times more likely to suffocate yourself in bed than to die from a terrorist. Have to keep this thing in perspective. The media is trying to hold terrorism up there as this horrible killer of Americans. That list I just gave you didn't even include the people who die from medical mistakes. But you're supposed to be afraid of terrorists, and because of the terrorists, you have to just do what the government says. You have to shelter in place, which means cower in your home, keep your window shades down, don't look outside, don't take pictures, don't take videos, don't question, don't witness it for yourself. Just trust that corporate TV news to tell you what to think here. Now, here's the really bizarre thing. We're already seeing this shelter in place get used all over the country. Up in Valley Springs, California, there was a 9-year-old girl who was killed, and they immediately declared a shelter in place for the entire town. Locked them down, police and military in the streets, while they search for this guy. They're trying to sell you the idea shelter in place is the new normal. Don't look outside your windows. Don't witness it for yourself. Just stay in your home and keep your blinds down. Nazis did the same thing to the German people. When they would close off a neighborhood to look for somebody, they'd just tell everybody, stay in your home, citizens. Keep your blinds drawn. Don't open your doors. Just accept what you're told. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The city of Philadelphia is now advising residents on how to prepare for shelter in place. And they're saying you should have a 3-day supply of food and water and medicine, batteries, and so forth in your home for shelter in place. Remember a couple of months ago they were making fun of the preppers? And now all of a sudden they're saying there might be a shelter in place coming. You have to prep. So all of a sudden being a prepper is now fashionable, at least in the city of Philadelphia. Now the rush to war is continuing. Even though they did not get the public outcry for vengeance against those gosh darn Arab Muslims, the rush for war is going on. We are hearing that apparently Israel just bombed Damascus, again, claiming they got a chemical weapons factory. More about that. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we get on to what's going on in Syria, one of the members in the chat room was pointing out Stasi did exactly the same thing. Anytime they needed to lock down a neighborhood, stay in your home, close the blinds, don't look outside. Soviets did it as well. You need to understand the United States government is facing a major, major problem called digital cameras. Every cell phone has one, and it's become a major problem for the staging of these false flag incidents when everybody out there is with a camera. By the way, we got confirmation that those people who responded to the FBI's request for their cell phone and camera and camcorder footage by turning over their electronic devices, got them back with their photos deleted. They weren't allowed to keep copies of their own pictures. Just showing how they're trying to keep control of the narrative. Didn't succeed, but that's what they're trying to do here. Another article we just put up at whatreallyhappened.com saying that the FBI, the reason they can't come up with any photos and videos to actually incriminate the framed suspects is there were too many cameras. They can't do a Photoshop on all the different pictures from all the different angles that are going to match up. They'll be easy to spot here. By the way, you remember the transit cop who got shot? And they were blaming it on the Tsarnaev brothers. It's come out he was shot by another police officer, friendly fire. Now then, moving over here to what's going on in Syria. The FSA, the fake Syria army, I know that's supposed to be the free Syria army, but we know they're all fakes, is out there saying that Israel attacked Syria today. They made a point of flying over Assad's palace, and they bombed a site near Damascus that is claimed to be a chemical weapons site. And I want to remind everybody that when Israel went up and bombed the power station at Osirak, they claimed it was a nuclear weapons factory. And following the invasion of Iraq, international experts went and looked at the ruins and found it was just a power station. No nuclear weapons factory. Same thing with Syria before. They went in, bombed a facility, said, oh, they were building something hideous. Again, no evidence about it. And I remember back during the war in Iraq, there was a huge scandal where the U.S. went in and bombed a suspected chemical weapons factory. They just flattened the place. And it turned out it was a dairy. It was horrible. There was cottage cheese flying everywhere. And even worse, it turned out civilians had been taking refuge in the building because it was a sturdy building, and they all got killed. Remember when Monica Lewinsky was testifying regarding the blue dress and all that other nonsense? And Bill Clinton decided on that very day, that very moment, he had to go attack a chemical weapons factory in Sudan, which turned out to be an aspirin factory. You, the American people, got to pay to rebuild it after the owners sued for wrongful act of war. So, again, there is no evidence whatsoever this is a chemical site. They're just trying to put that whole weapons of mass destruction, be afraid, and it's not really working here. Apparently, earlier today, there was an attempt on the life of the Syrian prime minister. Huge bombing. They're calling it a suicide blast. Again, nobody really knows. Damaged his car, but he is still alive. Another, what looks like a false flag. Missiles were fired at a Russian passenger jet flying over Syria. And it's pretty obvious Assad isn't going to do something like that when Russia is being such a stalwart supporter. But they're just trying to get this thing going any way that they can here. Let's grab a couple of phone calls. Zane in Washington. Aloha, Zane. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Excuse me. I know you've covered this subject before. You've commented a month and a half ago about the statement of Attorney General Eric Holder saying that he would not be prosecuting financial crimes in the financial community for the simple reason that it would hurt their business. And, I just wanted to point out that this is the kind of double dealing that we're dealing with. I mean, he has a duty to enforce those laws.
That's exactly right.
And if he wants to have the right to come down on the states if they deign to produce their own state currency, then, you know, those rights should be called into question because he hasn't fulfilled his duty as the nation's top cop.
No, he hasn't. I mean, that's like saying we're not going to prosecute drug lords because it would harm their business, and our banks are dependent on that money to launder, which appears to actually be the case here. We're not going to prosecute, we're not going to shut down the bordello because that would harm their business. I mean, it is a very, very lame excuse. And basically what Holder is saying is these too big to fail banks have become so powerful they can blackmail the U.S. government. If you touch us, we'll crash the economy. Not the first time they did it. Remember the attempted coup d'etat against Franklin Roosevelt by the bankers back in 1933. And the whistle was blown on that by Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler. It's the actual factual foundation for the movie 7 Days in May. And when Roosevelt found out about it, he wanted to basically charge all of these bankers with high treason, and the bankers just sat there and said, you can't do a thing to us. If you arrest any one of us, we will crash the economy and the New Deal will be over. And Roosevelt had to wait until the outbreak of World War II to nail these guys under the Trading with the Enemies Act, because they were funding Hitler's rise to power. Okay, Zane, I know you had more to say. We've got to take a break for commercials. Stick around. I'm going to come back to you right after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. We're still talking with Zane in Washington. And, Zane, you had another comment you wanted to make, I think.
Yeah, I just think that people should take this as a key event and perhaps give some moral support to those reformers in state governments and elsewhere that would like to have an honest monetary system, but yet they're in conflict with the Justice Department, which is doesn't have the moral high ground here if they're willing to turn a blind eye to all this criminality.
Well, you're absolutely right, and of course the classic definition of fascism, which we get from Benito Mussolini, is the alignment of financial corporations and government power against the general population. And Eric Holder's comments, plus this very demonstrable policy since 2008 to not arrest and prosecute any of these Wall Street fraudsters, shows that we have in fact become a fascist economic dictatorship, where they're going to take from you and give to the bankers and share the loot among themselves, and they are completely unconcerned with the Constitution. They're certainly unconcerned with morality, with what is right. They're simply going to declare their robberies perfectly legal. They're getting ready to come for the savings account. And we are past the point where anybody can just sit on the sideline and say, I'm an impartial observer or I'm neutral. The time has come. You have to pick a side, fascism or restoration of the republic, and you're going to have to act on that.
Right. Yeah, I've done some activism around here and so forth. I have a monetary system based on this hyper shuttle idea.
I think we talked about that before, and I don't want to get dragged off into that again. We do need a monetary system of government-issued value-based currency. We need to get rid of the private central banks, but how it's going to be implemented in the fine details, we can basically leave until a later date. I oppose a return to a silver or gold-based standard, because right now those bankers whose paper money destroyed the U.S. economy have bought up most of the silver and gold. And we would just be trading one form of banker enslavement for another. I still think that a standard unit of energy, like the kilowatt hour, would make a good basis for a new monetary system, because it is a unit of value everybody recognizes as having inherent value, and it can be created in ample enough supply so that the supply of money grows with the general population. There are no shortages which can be used to monopolize and manipulate the currency, which is something we cannot let the bankers ever, ever, ever do again. We're going to switch over to Steve in Virginia. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello. I just wanted to ask your opinion about this comment the media has mentioned concerning jihad. I think the mother of the two young men supposedly made Do you think that's just more nonsense from the media trying to put more fear into people?
I would say it definitely would be, because if you look at the mother's statements starting on the day of the bombing up until recently, it was all, my kids are framed, my kids are framed. Why is all of a sudden she going to start talking about jihad?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just an attempt. They're trying to basically regain control of the narrative. And they're operating on this idea of pay no attention to what we said before. That's just those wacky conspiracy theorists. They're all evil. They're Muslims. It's jihad. You know, don't think, don't question, don't look out your window. Obama said that a week ago last Friday in his speech. Don't look at the alternative pictures and videos and stuff. Just wait till we complete our investigation, and we will tell you what to believe. I'm sorry, Obama. Your credibility is absolutely zero right now.
Yeah.
You know, especially. Go ahead.
I was just going to say we've noticed, of course, recent times, Netanyahu continuing with his trips over here to Washington, and then I think that maybe he's the one one of the main ones behind all this business that you were just mentioning about the missiles being shot at the plane and some of those things, I suppose.
That's how Israel has always operated. Trick other countries into fighting each other and then swoop in and dance on the ashes and say, we're in charge. And in fact, there's a couple of articles. We put up one at whatreallyhappened.com basically saying it is obvious at this point Israel's goal is to trick the world into a new global world war that will smash everybody except Israel to leave Israel in control of the aftermath. I'm absolutely convinced that Israel would love to see the United States and Russia destroy each other in a nuclear war, and that would leave Israel with its nuclear weapons and its delivery systems basically, for all intents and purposes, in charge of the Middle East oil fields, which would put them economically in charge of the rest of the world, which they already are through this network of private central banks, which are debt enslavement machines.
Yeah. Do you think that the Israeli leadership, do they take orders? They sure give out plenty, but make demands. But do they also take orders from the, how would you say, the higher up Zionists, like the Rothschilds and such? Are they just, they're one part of that system?
Yeah, I think it's hierarchy? I think it's all one interlinked system, and I don't know if Netanyahu is taking orders from them, but I'm sure they're discussing with each other the best way to move forward to serve their mutual agendas.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate your opinion.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Damon in Kansas. Aloha, Damon. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thank you for accepting my call. I was just calling about the New York Senator's comment from, the New York Senator's comment. He said that the NYPD is going to put over 1,000 troops into mosques to search out to find that boogeyman. That... It's just getting ridiculous, and it's just too much, because you earlier, about 3 weeks ago, was saying that Israel was sending their own personal, troops over, that.
Their investigators over to make sure that we got the right story about Boston. But let me ask you this. When a white guy robs a bank, you don't start saying we got to keep an eye on all white people. Got to keep them under surveillance, got to keep them under lockdown. When a black man steals a car, you don't go out and say all blacks are criminals, we got to keep an eye on them. Look, when you look at this epidemic of child sexual molestation among the clergy, and apparently they just nailed a high-ranking Baptist on this situation, do you start demonizing all Christians and send thousands of troops into Christian churches to search out all those child molesters? No. Only in this one narrow group of people, Muslims, is there such a concerted effort to take the crimes ascribed to some individuals and use them to demonize the entire religious group globally. And the obviousness of that double standard, where we're going to search out all the mosques because of those evil Muslims, why aren't you searching out all the churches for all the child molestation? That's a far, far older problem than terrorism. It goes back 1,400 years, according to that documentary, Mea Max Culpa Maxima, Silence in the House of God, which is a wonderful documentary on the subject. This is exactly the same thing the Nazis did with the Jews. They had a couple of staged incidents that they framed Jews for, and they started going after all the Jews. Same thing with the communists. They blamed the Reichstag fire on the communists, and they went after all the communists. It's the same tactic all over again, and the fact that it is Muslims this time instead of the Jews does not make it any more morally acceptable.
Thing is, I don't even think these guys even care about putting the sideshow on anymore. I really, like, if you hear the comment that John McCain said, like, who in his state goes, I represent that. Oh, yeah, we can attack you. Those guys don't even, they're taking their own problems in their own states. Like I said, if you're Hispanic in Arizona, you're going to get pulled over with no license. They're trying to find every little detail just to get in our lives, and it's quite
they
frankly,
are, because they're afraid of us. They're afraid of us right now. They're absolutely terrified. The American people are waking up to what's going on and getting ready to stand up and say no more. Now, you need to understand there is so much vote fraud in this country that members of Congress and the occupant of the White House really don't care what the American people think any longer. We have been completely disenfranchised in this system. The elections are a complete sham, and it's just infighting among each other, and whoever sells out to the richest corporations or the richest foreign government gets the job. And they go in there and they do the job for their sponsors, major corporations like Monsanto or foreign governments like Israel.
Well, it's just so obvious that that's what they're doing now. And literally, quite frankly, to go along with the joke, I write on their money. I write private central banking is killing us all. Just take your time. If anybody's got time or cash nowadays, good Lord, if you got cash. But if you got cash, write on it. That's my suggestion card to them. I know they just throw it away, but you know what? Just do that. Just little things like that. People need to get their voices heard. This is ridiculous. If you like you said, you can't just stick your head in the sand and hope things are going to go away. It's not like
we're past that point.
They're coming after us, and we need to be prepared, not attack or go out there and start chaos. We need just to stand up. Like, if 330 million Americans just say no, just one day just says no, that would end it. No questions asked. No nothing, no wars, no bombs, no nothing.
You're absolutely right. And if you want to put messages on the currency, which technically there's supposed to be a law against it, but it's completely unenforceable, you can just get a rubber stamp. Go down to your local office supply and get a rubber stamp saying private central banking is killing us all, like you said, or private central banking is the enemy of all mankind, or whatever other message you want it, and just put it on the money, just stamp it, spend it back into circulation. Obviously, don't take it back to the bank. As you say, they'll simply destroy it and issue more ink and paper, because it's just worthless in and of itself. There's no inherent value.
It is. Like I said, now it's just a suggestion card. You take $1 anywhere. I live in Kansas. You take $1 anywhere, you're not going to find anything. Bread here is $2.60 a loaf.
Yes.
Now, how anybody can just go to the store and go,
you're lucky
okay.
It's $6 a loaf here.
Oh, I know. And that's the thing. I got friends out in California telling me how they can barely survive. And I'm 22. I'm 22, and it's real scary for me because I understand. And I'm talking to my friends about this, and they're kind of understanding, but because they're fully in deep with the college bubble that they've caused and not counting the credit cards that they're lending these kids and everything. And after they fail, I got two friends that just joined the military for no apparent reason so they can just get ahead.
Yeah, that's one of the big sales pitches they have. If you join the Army, you will come out with all of these advantages over ordinary people, and that is simply not true. Most people going through the Army, they wind up peeling potatoes or washing floors or, working in a warehouse, and you don't need Army training to learn how to do those things. And it's an absolute joke, and there is a huge economic draft going on to crush down the economy in the community to drive the kids into the military. And that's not enough. Wrangle is out there. They're talking about bringing back the draft. If they get this war in Syria and Iran really going, they're going to start drafting kids of your age. So you get to go on out there and breathe depleted uranium dust, which you'll come home, have a family, and your kids are going to be born with 5 arms.
Yeah. And they'll say that's a plus. That's human evolution.
Yeah, really. It is. It's a horrible price that is being paid by the families of our returning veterans.
Yeah, and like I said, things are just like any little subject, like you said, just the returning veterans coming home. It's just sick. It's just sick if you see the statistics of how many of them are homeless.
Yes.
It's just sick of see how many of them are out of work.
I look that in the face every single week here. Every single week we look in that.
But the thing is that I'm slowly starting to see it. Just that everybody, they can't put their finger on it. Even if I tell them, you know, they still have that blank face, you know, like, oh, whatever.
Well,
but
you're dealing with, you know, you're dealing with 18 years of indoctrination in the state schools. It doesn't teach them how to think. It just teaches them to believe.
Speaking of school, I take care of my little sister, and she's 13 years old. Her school district got state funding to do a special sixth grade academy, quote unquote, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, I go into school. They don't have a library. They don't have a gymnasium. The gymnasium is literally the lunchroom, and you couldn't play a half-court game of basketball in it. And they just give the kids iPads. They literally do all the work. And I'm not even kidding this. I went on a field trip with her to help the students out and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Not even kidding this. The teacher told me they're going to put a camera on the front of the whiteboard, so the principal can give the morning announcements and the kids can respond and see him. Has anybody ever read 1984?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely there. And, you know, the problem with iPads, and some of our private schools here are also giving laptops to the kids, is we're finding out these schools are surveilling the kids even at home through those embedded cameras. And, of course, we may presume they're always looking at everything the kids are writing or saying to make sure they're not having bad thoughts. I mean, the age of the thought police is already in our public schools.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's super serious now. And that's what I'm saying. If you ask your kids what you're learning or even bring their homework home, is that they're just giving them nothing, just basically just giving them nothing, just making them do little brat work. It's sick, and like I said,
yeah, that's all the schools are there, to teach them to obey instructions, to not think, to not analyze, to not question. Just follow the step-by-step instructions on the computer, and all will be well. Until, of course, there's a complete meltdown and you get burned up in flame, but hey, the insurance will cover that, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Okay?
All righty. Well, thank you for accepting my call, Mike.
All right, we got it. I'm going to let you go here. We're almost to the end of the segment here. So getting back to Syria, we're hearing all these articles about how the U.S. is weighing a Syria response. Now, I may be an old fogey out here, but I remember the definition of the word response was that it's your reaction to an action by somebody else. Syria has not attacked the United States of America. No response is justified. What they're trying to do is to gin this thing up. Oh, Syria has chemical weapons. They may have used them on their own civilians. Well, that's the Syrian people's problem. And it's not ours. This is just another ginned-up war to serve the money junkies. Go back and look at that article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. Apparently somebody's coming out with an audio book for visually challenged people from that article. That's how that thing is taken off here. But they're just trying to get you to go along with another war in Syria. That's what Boston was really all about, to get your anger fired up against those Muslims. We've got to kill them anywhere they happen to be. And it's not working. It's not working. So that's why they're back to weapons of mass destruction. More about Syria when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we get further into Syria, we got another caller on the line, Michael in North Carolina. Aloha, Michael. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Doing fine.
Just want to call in. I was eating my breakfast and I nearly choked on it when the guy started talking about iPads, because I just had a conversation with my wife this Saturday, who's an educator. They are really, really pushing these things hard. And the implications, I'll give you one particular scenario. One of her principals is really pushing her to use the iPad. They want her, now everybody's physically in the room. When a student finishes his assignment, they want her to send a new assignment from her iPad to his iPad. And they're sitting in the same room. It's like they want no interaction between.
No, what they're doing is they're monitoring all the interaction, you know, so that there's the principal gets a report saying this teacher is responsive to the students and keeping them occupied, and this teacher is being lazy. even before the advent of personal computers and tablets and so forth, there's a great deal of control exerted over teachers by the administration. Not necessarily all of it is benign and beneficial. And I understand the attraction of the iPad. They're very good devices, but obviously we should be concerned about the potential for built-in spyware on behalf of the U.S. government. I think anybody who's using the cloud is, the government has already said, if you're on the cloud, you have no expectation of privacy.
The technology concern is a major concern, but I'm more concerned about, to be honest with you, and this was what the conversation was about. If you've read like Neil Postman and where he thinks society goes, the technological society goes, it's the disconnect between humans that I don't like. Well, you can see it in kids that are school age. You can see it. They don't connect well with each other. They can't communicate with each other.
That's
really
intentional. That's intentional, to keep us all isolated from each other and seeing the world entirely through these electronic devices, whether it's Edward R. Murrow's lights and wires in a box or these electronic devices. I mean, look at this push for social networking, and your circle of close friends are people spread all across the country, and you hardly ever meet them because it allows these devices, of course, allow for government censorship and supervision. We're already hearing where Facebook is apparently shutting down any Facebook pages that are questioning the official Boston narrative. We know that YouTube has been caught taking down videos that challenge the official story. We've caught them actually artificially suppressing view counts on videos that are questioning the official story. When they were still being sloppy about it, you'd go into a video and it would show something like 19,000 likes but only 4,000 views, which you know is absolutely impossible to accomplish. So, if you become dependent upon those electronic devices to communicate with your community, then those who are in charge of those electronic devices get to decide what conversations you will have and what conversations you will hear. Okay, we got to take a break for station identification. Michael, thank you very much. We'll be back with Syria after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And thinking about all this propaganda that we're seeing about why we have to go into Syria, why we have to go into Iran, and the rest of it, reminded me very much of this wonderful song by Jackson Browne called Lives in the Balance. And I first heard the song on a TV show called Miami Vice, the original one, directed by Michael Mann, in an episode called Stone's War, which was all about U.S. covert military operations in Central America. And it was very daring for Michael Mann to have done that, and I think it's one of the reasons why the show eventually was pulled from the air. But it's an amazing song. I'm looking for a video. I'm going to put it up there so you can listen to it. But it talks about the fact that all the corporate media is doing is it's selling you stuff, selling you hair color, selling you your new cars, selling you your new political leadership, and it's selling you wars. And that's what's going on here right now. Over at Guardian in Great Britain, they're running an article that the claims of Syrian nerve gas by Assad against the citizens are already undermined by the eyewitness accounts. There is no proof. It's just another one of these allegations like Saddam has germs, he's got chemicals, he's got whatever. Remember the mobile biological weapons laboratories, and they showed them all over the American media? And all they really had was this one trailer filled with some piping and plumbing, and they did this illustration saying, this trailer, when it's paired with these other 4 trailers, makes huge amounts of biological weapons. And it turned out that trailer was a weather balloon inflator, because hydrogen gas, which is used in weather and artillery balloons, is very hard to store. It's such a tiny molecule, it will just flow right through the sides of a steel containment tank. So it's easier to simply have a device that chemically produces vast amounts of hydrogen to inflate your weather and artillery balloons. And what's worse is the U.S. government knew that's what this was, because the Iraqis had purchased it from a company in Great Britain. They knew that's what it was. But they're going to wave it at you and say, it's a mobile biological weapons laboratory. You will believe us, because if you don't believe us, the terrorists will win. And they're on all about that. And we now know, of course, that all of that talk about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction was nonsense. Iraq had destroyed all of their weapons of mass destruction. They were in perfect compliance with the United Nations resolutions, something that Israel cannot claim. And the rest of the world isn't buying this. Over at Press TV, they're saying the U.S. is attempting to replay Iraq in Syria. They have weapons of mass destruction. So nobody's buying this thing here. John McCain is out there. He's trying the full court press. Anything he can think of, no matter how nonsensical, he's out there screaming about this thing. He's out there saying international forces should enter Syria because we have to go in and prevent Islamic militants from getting their hands on chemical weapons. Mr. McCain, would those be the same Islamic militants the U.S. is paying and arming to overthrow Assad? They don't even care if the propaganda makes sense. They're just looking for something that'll get traction with the American people. And like I said, their downfall, their doom is the people in control of this propaganda campaign are still stuck at the height of the Cold War in the 1950s and 1960s, where they would just say whatever they want, the media would repeat it, and the American people would simply accept it. And those days are gone forever. John McCain was out there saying if we don't invade Syria, the Syrian people will hate us for not invading them. Really? If we don't invade them, they will hate us for not invading them. Well, this is a replay of the we must go in and save them from their evil, cruel tyrant here. And even went further, saying that if we do not invade Syria to take out Assad, Syrian terrorists will take revenge on the U.S. for not attacking Syria. I remember when they were trying to tell us these terrorists were coming to attack us because we had declared war on them. Now McCain is saying exactly the opposite. They're getting desperate over there. I would not be surprised if there's a new Big Bang in this country to be blamed on Syrians. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're seeing all these articles in the American media. U.S. moves closer to military intervention in Syria. And John McCain and Lindsey Graham, they were all over the Sunday talking news shows, push, we've got to go into Syria. McCain is out there saying they'll hate us if we don't invade their country and smash it into rubble, which is absurd. I mean, they're getting desperate. Lindsey Graham even went further, saying if they don't invade, if the U.S. does not invade Syria, it will destroy their credibility with regard to Iran. So what Lindsey Graham is saying is even though we haven't come up with a convincing reason why we should go to war with Syria, we should smash them anyway just to prove how butch we are, to get Iran to back down. So they're grasping. They're grasping at straws. Lindsey Graham went on to say that there is a growing consensus in the Senate for U.S. action in Syria. Okay, I have an idea. Let's send the United States Senate to Syria. Let's give them all rifles and parachutes, day-glow orange jumpsuits left over from Abu Ghraib. Let's put them on a transport plane and send them over to Syria if they really think this is necessary. Because they're sure love to talk tough with other people's lives, with other children's lives. Let's see how much consensus they have if they're on the front lines having to dodge the bullets. Don't you miss the good old days when leaders who wanted war would actually lead their own forces into battle, like Napoleon or Alexander the Great? Yeah, when they're all safe in Washington, D.C., one of the most heavily defended parts of the planet Earth, it's easy for them to talk about war. It's not their lives. It's not their families' lives. Russia is out there again, sending a clear message. Do not attempt to go in and topple the Syrian government. And they, too, are making reference to the lies about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. It's just a repeat. Fool me once and all that. According to a journalist in Jordan, has stated that Putin has basically set a policy. They will go on supporting Assad even if the resulting battle reaches the streets of Moscow. They're sending a very clear message. If the U.S. goes into Syria and or Iran, Russia will turn it into the new Vietnam, and they will grind the United States down in a war of attrition that Russia can win because they have money. They took control of their central bank. They have modern weapons. They have nuclear weapons. The United States is economically exhausted. The United States is militarily exhausted. Even the new weapons they're bringing online don't work very well. We've reported on the Pentagon reports on the F-35. It's not going to survive a dogfight against its contemporary Russian equivalents. The new littoral combat ships, hideous development program. They're underarmed, under-armored, and their computer systems are wide open to hacking. You need to ask yourselves a question right now. Do you really want to risk war with Russia just to prop up the Federal Reserve note? Because that's what this is really all about. Keeping the Federal Reserve note as the global default reserve and trade currency. And it's already falling. Country after country are moving away from the dollar, and they're forming all these direct currency exchange treaties to not go through the dollar. They're abandoning the dollar faster than the U.S. can conquer them. So a lot of people are saying, what's next? With Boston having cratered in terms of an agenda to anger Americans to go after Muslims anywhere on planet Earth, what's next? Will there be a new false flag? I can guarantee you it's under consideration. Remember, after TWA 800 got shot down by accident by the United States Navy testing the Aegis CEC system, and the media couldn't keep a lid on all these people coming forward and saying, I saw a missile rise up from where this Navy was conducting a live fire test and kill the 747. So 1 week later, boom, Olympic Park bombing, and the corporate media drops the TWA 800 story. Never gets mentioned again. And they're off on the Olympic Park bombing. The Beirut bombing that killed all those Marines, huge embarrassment for the United States of America. Indications Israel knew about it in advance and didn't tell the U.S. because 240 dead Marines is much more useful to Israel politically than 240 live Marines and a thwarted bombing that barely makes the headline news. So 1 week later, the U.S. invades Grenada. And we still don't know what that was all about, but it changed the story, changed the focus, manipulated public perception. Are they planning a false flag? Absolutely. Now, there's a very interesting story out there, or it was out there. This was originally reported over in the Daily Mail, how leaked emails revealed there was a plan by the United States to fake a chemical weapons attack in Syria and blame Assad for it. Now, the Daily Mail has since removed the story from their website. It is the height of incredible naivete to think that if you remove that story from your own website, that it is not still out there all over the World Wide Web, because it is. So we know the U.S. was planning this false flag terror to get everybody to say, oh, that horrible Assad, he gassed his own people. Meanwhile, there's been another embarrassing video by the Free Syria Army, 95% of whom are not Syrian, where they grabbed two Shiite young men and beheaded them in public. And again, it proves this Free Syria Army is not a popular uprising, because in a real popular revolution, you need the support of the general population. You don't go out and do things that alienate that support. Again, think about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson trying to get the British out of this country. How far would they have gotten if they went around burning down colonial churches and executing colonial school children? The answer is they wouldn't have gotten very far at all. That tells us this is a hired mercenary army committing acts of terror to try and convince the public to drop their support for Assad. And apparently John McCain thinks these people would make a great new government for Syria. Better than Assad. From the point of view of the Federal Reserve and America's oil companies, yeah, it would. And certainly Israel would like Assad taken care of. Anyway, let's see. And again, we're going to keep making that reference to Iraq and the weapons of mass destruction. And again, you need to remember, throughout history, any leader, any tyrant who wanted to start a war had to lie their own people into it, because war is very hard work, very poorly paid. You have to leave your home and your family and march huge long distances carrying very heavy equipment. There's a very real possibility you are going to be killed or lose important parts of your body. And so ordinary people do not want war. So to start a war, leaders must trick their people into it, to convince them that war is the only option. They're coming to get us. They hate us for our freedoms. They're committing acts of terror. And we know these acts of terror are, pretty much all of them, faked to do that. And if you go back and you look at all of the lies about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and how evil they were and how cruel a tyrant Saddam Hussein was, you'll see it's the same playbook in action for Syria. And then it'll be the same playbook in action for Iran. And after that, Saudi Arabia. Because now the FBI has come out with a new report that Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11. They're just going to use that and blame everybody. Whoever they want to attack, oh, we have new evidence that they were involved in 9/11. Now, there appears to be another false flag attack going on here. They're making a big deal over the fact that Netanyahu's helicopter was forced to land because they saw a drone flying in their airspace. And Israel blamed Lebanon for it and Hezbollah. And Lebanon and Hezbollah said, we don't even have that kind of drone. Now Israel's saying, oh, had to be Iranian. The Iranians sent the drone to Lebanon, which then flew into. They're grasping at straws to find something that will get the people to go along with these new wars. They're trying to find something that will gain traction in the minds of America. And I don't think what they understand, and this is what comes from spending too much time deciding policy with focus groups, every new trial balloon undermines the credibility of the entire push for war. Because there's no clear focus of the story. They've lost control of the narrative. 1 week it'll be chemical weapons. Next week it'll be save them from their evil tyrant leadership. After that, oh, they're sponsoring international terrorism. And as they keep changing the stories, ordinary people are saying, they don't know what's going on. They're just making this stuff up. And that's what's going on. Now, the former chief of the Mossad has gone public saying that Israel should defy Netanyahu on this push for war with Iran. So even the people of Israel aren't buying this stuff. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has gone public saying Netanyahu is exaggerating this Iranian threat. So even officials within Israel are saying this is really nonsense and it's gone on far enough. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the rush for war with Syria and Iran. And remember, last summer, Obama made a commitment to Benjamin Netanyahu that if Iran did not shut down their nuclear industry, meaning their power station, their medical isotopes, industrial applications, that Obama committed to military force in Iran by June of this year. And they're trying to move forward with that. And they're trying to convince you how it's necessary to shut off their nuclear power station. Let them burn camel patties for their light for their home, because they're just evil Muslims anyway. Now we're seeing a new spin coming out of Israel, even as we reported just previously, Netanyahu's own supporters, Olmert, former head of Mossad, are saying this really has gone far enough. And so now the new spin is that if Israel does not attack Iran, their credibility will suffer, because we've been hearing this constant ramping up of Iran is a threat, Iran is a threat, is Iran a threat? And now the new spin is if, Iran may not really be a threat, but if Israel doesn't attack them, it'll harm their credibility. Well, Mr. Netanyahu, you can relax. You don't have any credibility, and neither does Israel. So you've got nothing left to lose by letting peace abide. Remember that silly little cartoon that he drew at the United Nations, his little bomb, and said, they're at the red line, they're at the red line. It's all fraud and propaganda. They want your kids to die in wars on their enemies. And there are all these overlapping agendas. Israel wants to be the power in the region, which means smash any Islamic nations. that are capable of competing with Israel politically and economically, mostly the economic. Smash them into little tiny, easy-to-control bits. And, of course, that overlaps with the U.S. government's agenda of forcing all the resource-rich nations on Earth to sell their resources only for U.S. dollars. Trying to bring the petrodollar deal to the entire planet, making sure that international trade is carried out only through the U.S. dollar, return to Bretton Woods. It's very obvious the rest of the world does not want to go along with this because of how they abused Bretton Woods before. Now, over in Afghanistan, it turns out, at this time when there isn't enough tax money for our roads and schools and hospitals, it turns out the Central Intelligence Agency has been funding Afghanistan's President Hamid Karzai, El Presidente de UNOCAL, tens of millions of dollars over the last 10 years. Apparently, they're just shipping pallets of hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in cash to Hamid Karzai, with which he then goes out and tries to bribe the ruling class of Afghanistan to go along with his and the U.S. agency. In other words, the top source of corruption in Afghanistan's corrupted government is the Central Intelligence Agency. They're trying to cling to power there. And the Afghani people do not want a U.S. puppet regime ruling their country any more than the people of Iraq do, or the people of Iran did. And they're just throwing the money around like that and telling you you're going to have to do without because we need that money to bribe those foreign governments to do what we tell them. So you're going to have austerity, and you're going to have to deal with fewer schools and, larger classrooms, and we're going to have to cut your Social Security and your Medicare. We're going to have to cut funding to education. We're going to have to let the roads rot a little bit more because, by golly, nothing is more important than forcing the Federal Reserve note on the rest of the planet and bringing private central banking to those few pesky countries who still refuse to see the light. Now, apparently the commanding officer of SEAL Team 4, best known for finding and then killing the guy we were told was Osama bin Laden, has supposedly committed suicide. Oh, he was so depressed. He was really depressed. He'd gotten the villain of the century, but it wasn't enough, and he just killed himself. As of right now, 25 members of the team that supposedly killed bin Laden are now dead. Just think about that. What are the odds that 25 members of that team would be dead just a few years later? Kind of a little bit out there. And they say, oh, it's a suicide. Really, it was a suicide. He committed suicide. And, of course, that, too, was a fake. If you go up to the top of my website, whatreallyhappened.com, and you just look for that little menu item, a gallery of fake dead bin Ladens, that was another one of these government lies to try and make Obama look good for the election. I got the villain of the century. And it was a complete fake, complete fraud. Not even good quality fakes. Just absolute crap. And we did confirm the fake photos that I've taken apart in that article were the ones being shown to members of Congress to say, yes, we got him. Huzzah, huzzah. Aren't we great? All right, let's talk about the economy. I want to get into some of these other things. Canada has now admitted what we already knew from reading their blueprint for their next budget. They are putting in a mechanism for Cyprus-like seizure of savings accounts in the case of bank failure. We told you, we told you, we told you, we told you. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about the Canadian government is admitting. At first they were trying to deny it because in that blueprint for their next federal budget, this idea of finding alternate sources of funding the banks if they start to fail was worded rather ambiguously. And Canada was saying, oh, no, we're not talking about savings accounts. And then somebody said, okay, what are you talking about? And they said, well, yeah, we're talking about savings accounts. Now we're having this story where a governor of the Federal Reserve is now stating publicly, he said this in a speech. In this speech regulating large financial institutions, they said if and when a too-big-to-fail bank fails, talk about an oxymoron right there, Depositors will lose everything. Cyprus is the template. Now, in Cyprus, they only took accounts over 100,000 euros because up to that point, they're insured. And a lot of Americans are running around right now and saying, well, listen, I only have $15,000 in my savings account. That's covered by the federal government insurance. Well, guys, all they have to do is say that the federal government insurance doesn't cover a haircut. The federal insurance program is if the bank actually fails. And if the bank isn't failing because they've taken your savings account, the insurance will not apply. We know they're just changing the rules to suit themselves. And so all the banks are at risk. In this article we were just talking about coming out of the CBC, where they're saying, Canada's saying, yeah, savings accounts could be taken. They're saying make your preparations now, and that's absolutely correct. You should get your wealth out of the banks right now. Only have as much money in the banks as you need to cover your obligations. Keep the rest under your own control. Take advantage of these artificially depressed silver and gold prices and put some of that cash into gold and silver. Even if it's junk silver, if you want some investment grade stuff, Republic Trading Group. They're getting serious when they're actually admitting to you that their solution to prop up this Ponzi scheme central bank is to literally steal your bank accounts. You know it's at the end. Speaking of Canada, they're now declaring that bitcoins are going to be taxed. All transactions through bitcoins will be subject to transaction taxes. They are not exempt. They're taxing everything they can to try and raise more money to keep this little Ponzi scheme going again. They're taxing raindrops in some states here in the United States. You're not allowed to collect rainwater on your own property. Those are the king's raindrops, you knave. If you take the king's raindrop, if you dare drink the king's raindrops, you'll have your ears lopped off or something like that here. A lot of people still reacting from Matt Taibbi's story of last week, where basically everything in the financial system is being rigged. And they're talking about rigging of the volatility indexes. They're talking about rigging of the derivatives rates. This is even bigger than LIBOR was. We have this article. This appeared over in New York Post. Influential economist says Wall Street is full of crooks. Yeah, it is. And the reason it is full of crooks is because the U.S. federal government, the finest government that money can buy, won't do anything about it. Like that caller was saying earlier in the show. Eric Holder was saying, we can't arrest the bankers. It would harm the system. Well, he's obviously thinking about the banking system, and what he's not thinking about is the United States system as a whole, because our system as a whole has already been crippled by these banker crimes. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing fine.
Well, you know, the thing is, I know one of the businesses I frequent, I do business with, local businesses, finally, the owner got sense and got rid of one of these college degree person didn't know, top from bottom of how to do things,
yeah.
Real operation. And finally, he hired somebody that worked there all these years and to the management position. Well, the first thing he did, he got rid of all the people that weren't productive, the people that were attacking the productive people and getting them fired and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you one thing, and the blowback was, now the company's being sued for wrongful termination. And I kind of noticed, Mike, that lately it's more like the most productive people in the workplace get attacked. And the lazy, unproductive people, nothing happens to them.
Yeah, well, it's because it's all dominated by politics. It was exactly the same thing that you saw in the Soviet Union before its collapse, where politics rules everything. And I understand you can never find a universe without some degree of politics, but we need to understand that politics, like private central banking, is destructive of society as a whole. We have just gone completely away from a meritocracy. We're incentivizing failure and criminality. I have a story a little bit further out. In fact, let me skip on down to this a little bit. Have you heard about this car, the Fisker Automotive? was selling selling these cars called the Karmas. It's an electric car. It's $103,000. It's a high-end electric car for rich people to drive and say, see, I'm thinking about the world. And it turns out each car costs $660,000 to make. And the difference between that $500,000 cost to manufacture and the $103,000 they're selling it for is all taxpayer subsidies. We're incentivizing failure, and we punish success. And that is a good way to wreck a nation.
You know, one thing, reading Edward G. Griffiths and a bunch of other books about fiat currency.
Yeah.
You know, you talk about these preachers, we got to do something about the moral decay in this country. You know how you get rid of the moral decay? Go back to honest money.
Absolutely. When the entire banking system, right to its core, is a giant fraud, inevitably, like attracts like. And these people realize it's a criminal system, but hey, it's making a lot of money, I want part of it. Go back to look at when the SEC was being warned by Harry Markopolos of Bernie Madoff's massive, massive fraud. And the few times the SEC sent investigators over there, the investigators walked in and they handed their resumes to Bernie. They wanted in on the action. And again, I don't have a problem with people who want to be rich. I'd like to be rich myself. But a society does not survive entirely on the acquisition of this make-believe money and that passes for real wealth here. You've got to have a balance of priorities. Yes, it's nice to be rich and build the prosperity of a nation. You also have to take care of the infrastructure to make that acquisition of wealth practical. You've got to take care of your working class because ultimately labor precedes real capital. And when you undermine your own working class, when you disincentivize their work, when you just dump the burden of the society onto them, you take away their incentive to excel. You've got to incentivize excellence. You've got to incentivize quality. And again, this lust for more of these ink and paper things has so poisoned our entire upper economic system and our government. They really have lost sight of the overview of the nation as a whole, and we've got to get back to that. I'm not opposed to making money, but there are other things that it takes to make a society work. Taking care of the less fortunate, making sure everybody is fed, keeping the public utilities public and not just selling them off to be another money-making venture.
Well, you know, but the good thing about this employer that's being sued, he's backing up the manager, and they hired a bunch of private investigators going after these fired employees because they stole a bunch of stuff and blamed it on other people. I mean, because like I say, the worst thing you do is allow unproductive people to attack the productive.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And the unproductive people, because they know they're unproductive and they just say, well, I don't have to worry about being productive. I just have to play the political game and I'll get there. And I saw so much of this in Hollywood. It's one of the reasons why I am so anti-union. Unions were the bane of my existence for my entire career in Hollywood. And it's a shelter for the non-productive. They get together, they unionize, and then they just sit there and say, hey, we're union, you can't fire me, you got to pay me, and I'll get around to doing some productive work at some point. And it does strangle and paralyze the nation. Now, I understand that unions can serve a valid, useful purpose to counter the oppressions of the money junkie management, but it can also go too far. And again, as a nation, we have lost our love of making a quality product just for the love of making a quality product. Everything that we look at in the world is seen solely through that little colored lens of how much cash will this get me within the next few days. And that's so short term. The long term is completely invisible to our political class right now.
What do you remember back like 20 years ago, Lucky's and Stater Brothers, the unions were going to strike? Well,
yeah.
I was part of the meat cutters union. I was part of the meat cutters, and I worked for Stater Brothers, and I was told, don't work too hard. And
yeah, you make the rest of us look bad. I've heard that many, many times in my career. You know, don't do so many good things. You're making the rest of us look bad. You're causing ripples. You know, the nail that sticks up gets hammered and all this other stuff. Speaking of unions, do you remember the Food Lion scandal, ABC? The Food Lion workers were trying to unionize, and ABC went in undercover and created this completely fictional story about how the non-union food handlers in Food Lion were dropping meat on the ground and then putting it in a package to sell, and it turned out it was completely faked. by ABC. They got sued. It was a record settlement. And then I think it was Rick Kaplan was the producer of that segment, went on to an even better career at CNN.
Yeah, I heard that story. But, the thing is, Mike, we had a new neighbor just moving down the street, and he was a little low on cash till he get his other paycheck. I paid him $50 to cut my grass. I just wanted him to cut my grass, but I didn't expect him to trim my around the trees and edge and all that stuff. But he gave me he gave what he thought was $50 worth of work.
There are still people like that, and we've got to encourage them, but we have way too many people in the higher levels of our society who think the purpose of life is to just get everybody to send you their wealth and not really have to give them anything back for it. All of Wall Street is based on that. To game the system, to rig the system, to buy and sell and make money, all of which comes out of other people's pockets, and they return nothing of real value to our society at all. It's a parasitic entity.
Well, the thing is, I think from the corrupt rot within, in the U.S. government, in the banking system, it's going to come crashing down.
I agree. We just have to be patient. We have to make sure we do not give the government an excuse to declare a national emergency and martial law, and it is. It's coming down right before our very eyes right now.
Well, like I say, I pray each day that, people remain calm and think before they do, react.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay,
thank you,
George, thank you for the call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Nick in Japan. Aloha, Nick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Yes, I just got two things that I wanted to say really quickly, and I have a question. In response to last week, I remember Ryan came on the phone, and we were talking a little bit about social responsibility, which kind of ties in to what we're talking about today with unions and so forth. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to say that, no one is saying that there needs to be complete divestment. I think Ryan had that assumption. We're talking about strategic divestment. And you have to draw the line somewhere, but not buying a product you don't need is that line. You don't want to buy Mac, fine, or you want to buy Mac, that's fine. But it's kind of like Thomas Sowell's preferential policies for the people. You do have to draw the line somewhere, but making the argument that, the ubiquitous argument, like, Martin Luther King had maybe, 60 churches. The North, by and large, didn't want to pursue the policy of civil rights movement. Same thing, Mahatma Gandhi faced the same problem.
Yeah, but in both cases, you were dealing with governments that were propagandizing and demonizing them to try and turn people against. A good example in terms of Martin Luther.
It's no different today.
Well, exactly. In the case of Martin Luther King, remember the FBI came out with that Black Panther coloring book that was designed to anger the whites against the blacks. And as you say today, we're seeing this constant media campaign to anger everybody against the Muslims. It's always, every government needs a scapegoat group on which to blame everything, whether it's Emmanuel Goldstein in George Orwell's 1984, it's the Jews in Nazi Germany, today in America it's the Muslims. It's the same mechanism over and over.
It's somehow, some way, we've got to send the message that we will not buy GMO under any circumstances. And the reason why I chose to highlight Coca-Cola is they've been able to tilt the law, tilt legislation in their favor. Mm-hmm. In states and countries that will not import GMO, Coca-Cola has sneakily been able to get their product in there. But actually what I really wanted to address is what you were saying earlier, and this ties into it. You said that the government could just simply print their way out of it, just print money out of thin air, and I think that this is a grossly misleading term.
I did not say that. I said, and we're already hearing that they're trying to figure out ways to stop printing money by looting the savings account. Printing money printing your way out of the debt only works so far, and you start undermining the value of the dollar. And we're seeing all these other countries that are already getting away from the dollar because of its severe devaluation. And that's why they're looking for these other solutions. Overprinting the currency is always a short-term solution with very long-term drastic consequences.
Well, that's what you want to do. That's what social responsibility essentially does. I mean, while the Fed digitally loans money into circulation, buying securities, it increases the money supply, social responsibility takes that into account. It knows. I mean, this is why social responsibility works. The word for credit means credere in Latin, which means to believe. When we believe in a certain product, we spend our fiat currency, which means to let it be done. Fiat in Latin means let it be done in my name.
Yes.
So we're literally letting the process be done in our name. We facilitate the process. And this is what I was trying to say to you earlier. You know, I've spent maybe 6 years listening at your feet, and I've learned the dark, you know, the motivations of governments. And I fully understand that government can be extremely evil and malicious. But I think there's only one of two ways that we can respond. We respond with physical violence, which we don't want to do, or we respond peacefully, and the only way we can do that is economically. And so I don't like the idea, and I'm hoping that, you know, people do not dismiss this idea so easily that we have within our power economically to vote for with our wallets. But I do not believe the system is going to come down.
Well, obviously we're going to agree to disagree on that. And, you know, boycotting certain products, definitely you want to boycott GMO. There's apparently more and more states are looking at GMO labeling laws. Other countries are banning them outright. You know, you probably need to connect with Karen Tostado because she's talking about, you know, a complete boycott, a national strike to send the message. But the system is already coming down. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Nick. We'll be right back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here. John in New York. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing great.
Hey, I was just thinking, what you were saying before about all the propaganda when you first got on your show, I turned on the news this morning, our local news station, which I think is an NBC affiliate up here in the Albany, New York area.
Yeah.
I'm watching them. The first story they start talking about is Boston, about the mother. Now she's a person of interest. I'm like, who isn't a person of interest anymore in this case?
Well,
it's getting ridiculous.
It is, but Russia Today is now reporting that the FBI is saying there's a much wider group of suspects and persons of interest, which I think what it means is they can't make the case against the Tsarnaev brothers, so they're going to find some other patsy and say this was the mastermind, and they'll waterboard him until they get a confession like they did with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and they'll use him to bolster the official story. But it all comes down to whether the public is buying this stuff or not, and the public doesn't seem to be buying this anymore.
It's coming down to the red pill and the blue pill.
It absolutely is.
That's what it's coming down to. But that's all I had to say to you, other than I bet you missed some whole belly clams being out there in Hawaii.
I really do. I miss New England-style fried clams, and you can't get them anywhere on this rock. The closest thing they have are the clam strips down at the Red Lobster, and it just isn't the same.
I know. They're great, that's for sure. But I'll be thinking of you when I have them when I'm out in New Hampshire.
All right, by God. Don't forget that dill relish. That's just not the same without the dill relish. All right, thanks an awful lot.
All right, Mike.
All right, bye-bye. Yes. I do miss a lot of what I knew back in New England here. And, you know, Hawaii's beautiful, don't get me wrong. But it's all basalt and bikinis. And for somebody who's a geology student like me, after a while it does get kind of boring. I miss some of what we knew back in Southern California. My wife and I used to go out to the Mojave, and we'd find gemstones and tumble them, and we had a lot of fun with that stuff. Anyway, but I digress. Interesting article that came out from the Trenches World Report. Lose a house, get $300. Why aren't rioters burning down the banks? And I'm not suggesting that you should do that, obviously, but you have to wonder, are Americans so drugged with their tap water and brain dead that they don't understand what just happened? The foreclosure fraud scandal. These banks engaged in criminality to take your entire house because they needed the value of that house on their balance sheets to stay solvent. That little monthly payment they were making wasn't enough to save them. So they went out and committed fraud and took houses. They got caught. The Obama administration arm-twisted all of the 50 states' attorneys generals to not criminally prosecute. There was a foreclosure fraud settlement, which has basically come down to $300 for everybody whose home was taken away from them through fraud, and we've heard some of those checks are even bouncing. Why aren't you angry about what this government is doing? Why aren't you angry about all the lies that you have been fed to take your children away and send them to these wars of conquest? How many times do you have to be lied to before you understand that everything from the government and the corporate media is, in fact, just another lie? So, anyway, we're going to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. Dan the Man is now in our control room taking care of business. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Now, over at truthout.org, very interesting story. And the headline reads, "When Your Boss Steals Your Wages, the Invisible Trend That's Sweeping America." And we have already been talking about the abuses of the so-called internship program, where you will have young people fresh out of college who will come into corporations and they are required to work unpaid for 3 to 6 months as part of their training and evaluation, after which the corporation can either give them a job, usually it's somewhere around minimum wage, or just simply let them go. There is another phenomenon that is taking place, and that is for employers to, instead of paying you per hour, they pay you for each unit of work you complete. And it's presented as the workers about, hey, the harder you work, the more money you will get, and then you find out the pay per unit of work is so low, you're not even making minimum wage any longer, and it's just another way for the money junkies to get around minimum wage and drive everybody down into poverty. And it is such a short-sighted approach, because when you're a business manager, business owner, collectively, your employees are your customers. And if every business in town is grinding their employees down to below minimum wage, where are you going to get your customers? Where are you going to get the people to come into the stores and buy whatever it is you're making? And it's another proof that Adam Smith was absolutely wrong. This idea that if everybody was personally greedy, the system as a whole would progress. And John Nash, Nobel Prize winner in mathematics, in his doctoral dissertation, showed why Adam Smith was wrong. But Wall Street wants to continue to worship at the altar of Adam Smith because it justifies personal greed and a complete disregard for the society around you. You move a society, an economy, a civilization forward by maintaining an overview of what is best for the whole. We don't expect that behavior from corporate executives. We demand that oversight role from our government to keep a view of the whole, what is good for the whole nation, which means good roads, sturdy bridges, good schools, good hospitals, taking care of the people, keeping the public utilities public. When the government abandons that role of maintaining the overview, of maintaining the long view of the future, when they simply cozy up to the money junkies and partake of their generosity in campaign donations and lobbying fees, the country is doomed. And that's why I'm obviously in disagreement with Nick in Japan. I think the system's on the verge of coming down. When they reach the point where the banks are keeping themselves technically solvent by looting their own depositors' savings accounts, that's not a banking system that is working in any reasonable definition of the word. That is plunder. It is pillage of the general population. And they can declare it to be legal, but it doesn't change the fact that it's morally repugnant. Certainly repugnant to the Constitution. Everything Nazi Germany did was the letter of the law. If that made it okay, why did we go to war against them? Everything Germany was doing was legal. That should have made it all right. And yet we keep hearing that time and time again. Oh, yes, it may be wrong to take the homes, and it may be wrong to do this, and it may be wrong to skirt minimum wage, but it's legal. That makes it okay. No, it doesn't. It's a question of whether law serves the people or law serves the money junkies. I don't need to tell you which one we are in right now. Going to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We are just getting a breaking story out of Press TV. Apparently, clashes, they're calling it clashes, have erupted in Baghdad, right in the capital city, including rockets fired at the airport. Sounds like it's a major uprising, and it's just a reminder. The people of Iraq do not consider their brand new U.S.-approved puppet regime and their brand new private central bank and the demand that their oil be for sale only for U.S. dollars to be a blessing. So we could see a major renewal of violence inside Iraq. And, of course, the U.S. government says, we must send troops in there. We must stabilize the situation. We must always keep Iraq's oil for sale only for the dollar. We must prop up our puppet regime. And they're going to send your kids to do it here. Going to grab a phone call here real quick. Radar in New York. Aloha, Radar. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, aloha. I wanted to know, like, what you get out of doing this. It seems like they're hitting us from 1,000 points. You know, they're tampering. Long ago, I heard through Gary Null they had like 1,100 laboratories, and, you know, there's going to be a phase where they're going to put all kinds of germs or bugs. There's this H7N9 bird virus in Japan, I think, and now it's spread to Singapore, and they're calling it like a stealth.
It's a sales pitch. It's a sales pitch. It's to scare everybody to go and buy vaccines. As for what I get out of this, trust me, there are.
No, I mean, we can't stop it. Look,
obviously, I think we can. Public awareness. We're already seeing people are refusing vaccines and vaccinations. That's why they're now trying to set up this national registry where you will buy the vaccines we tell you to buy. But we already know that vaccine sales have, other than block buys by governments themselves, you know, people are refusing these new vaccinations. There's been another tragedy with this 5-month-old baby was taken to the hospital, and even though the baby was obviously ill, they gave her the round of vaccines and the baby died. And it says right in the instructions with the vaccines, do not administer if the patient is already ill with something. And they went ahead and did it because they got a cash incentive.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's all about the money. But as far as, you know, why I'm doing this, obviously I think change is possible. I think that over the going on 20 years that I have been doing this, that we have at least held off the warmongers and the money junkies a little tiny bit, to the point where we're now seeing literally this race to try and get World War III really going before the private central banks collapse and the people of the world recognize what has really been the cause of all the evils they've suffered for the last going on 2 centuries. Or going on 1 century, at least in this country. Again, why do I do it? I hold it as the highest moral imperative that we leave to our next generation a better world than that which was left to us. At present, our generation has failed that task. But I still see the very real probability that the Federal Reserve is going to collapse and the federal government with it, and we need to start laying the foundation for what kind of a nation we want to be here to take care of that future generation. We need to go back to the model of the original United States of America. No private central bank, no private central bank, no private central bank. Limited power, divided authority, checks and balances. All those things worked really well until the money junkies came in and simply bought themselves the government. And that's why we have to take the power away from the money junkies. Having bankers in charge of our nation's economy makes about as much sense as having drug addicts in charge of the pharmacies. Money is supposed to serve the people. It's supposed to be a public utility, not just another scam to loot the real wealth from the labor of the people and put it in the pockets of the bankers. And we need to return back to that.
Well, you have people like that. You've always had people like that. This country was built on a genocide program against the Native Indians where they took out 96% of them. They killed them all.
I think you lost the focus of what I was trying to say here. When this country was started, it was recognized that private central banking was a villain. We fought the American Revolution to break free of the Bank of England. And then the Bank of England tried to come back in. They succeeded in bribing enough politicians, like Alexander Hamilton, to set up the first bank of the United States. After 20 years of deprivation and poverty, Congress refused to renew the charter. And the Rothschilds came in and said, if you don't renew the charter, we'll start a war. And sure enough, the next year, War of 1812. All wars are ultimately bankers' wars. Wars are the bankers' richest harvest. And if we want a future that is peaceful, we need to return bankers back to their proper role in society where they must court depositors. and only use that depositor's money to make loans. They should not be allowed governmental power, especially as they're unelected. We have another article, in fact, Neil McDonald out there, the monarchs of money, and he's saying these private central bankers really are running the world. They're not an elected government. They don't see themselves as serving society or the population. They serve only themselves. They are fascism in its purest form. All right, thank you for the call. We're going to switch over to Robert in Sacramento. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, it's Robert.
I'm sorry, Robert. It was mistyped in my little window here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm calling about the bomber.
Yes.
In what is it? Yeah,
Boston.
In Boston.
Yes.
Yeah, his uncle says that the bomber is half Armenian, and says that he guided him how to become a good Muslim and helped him bomb.
Well, you know, there's something about that uncle you need to know. He's married to the daughter of a CIA official.
Yeah, I read that.
Okay.
And Armenians are pretty much Christian, largely, pretty much virtually Christian. It's been said they were the first Christian nation, and this sounds really, really bad. I think it says, I have an article here. It says, mysterious Misha turns out to be half Armenian, denies involvement in Boston.
Whoops. Sorry about that. That was my fault.
Okay.
Go ahead.
You get what I said?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. The article says that he's half Armenian, and the guy is of Armenian Ukrainian descent and lives with an American girlfriend with his elderly parents. And he confirmed that he indeed was a convert to Islam, but roundly denied any part in Tourmaline.
Yeah, they're just looking for another patsy. They're looking for a patsy. They can't convince the American people these Tsarnaev brothers were the villains. Now they're widening the net, and the first person who comes along who looks like a credible Muslim terrorist is going to be thrown up on the corporate media to say, this is your villain, hate him, 2-minute hate, let's go invade Syria. That's all it's all about.
Yeah, and one more thing. The April 24th is Armenian Remembrance Day of the Armenian Genocide. And this doesn't jive, I find it kind of funny. It's around the same time when Armenians are commemorating the first genocide against them by the Ottoman Empire, which was, pretty much it was a theocracy basically and
most nations, up until the United States took the very revolutionary step of saying there will be no state religion, most governments, to some extent, were a theocracy because there was an official state religion used to help control the people. Got to let you go. The phone lines are loading up. We're running short on time, and we're going to switch to Danny in South Carolina. Aloha, Danny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. I just got a Skype message from a very irate friend in Australia. Sent me a link to a Jewish Times of Australia article announcing that on, I guess, last Tuesday, the Prime Minister signed a declaration combating anti-Semitism. One of the statements in the new law says, quote, it requires signatories to challenge any foreign leader, politician, or public figure that denies, denigrates, or trivializes the Holocaust. It also goes on where it says they must take appropriate action to prevent the airing.
Israel is pushing this all over the globe right now, but you need to remember, truth does not need law to protect it.
Well, I know that. My question is, he thinks it's coming to the USA.
It probably is if the Israel has their way. We've heard it floated in Congress many times, but of course they're coming up against that pesky First Amendment right to freedom of expression, which includes freedom of expression regarding politics. Israel's entire justification for stealing Palestine was, they were afraid of the Holocaust, they were afraid of all of that stuff. And if the entire foundation for their political agenda in seizing Palestine is exposed as a complete fraud, that delegitimizes Israel. And again, if you look at how hard they protect that legend, it's obvious they've got something to hide there. Now, when I was young, I bought into the entire Holocaust mythology, even though my uncles who'd served in Europe in World War II said, don't believe what you're being told about what was going on in Germany. And I was a young kid. I didn't pay attention to them. I was too busy watching the Mickey Mouse Club, watching Annette fill out her sweater there. But what made me first start to question that story, and we've got to take a break here real soon, was just how hard they worked to shut down anybody asking questions. We've got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Danny. I'll respond more after we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And responding to what Danny was saying, truth needs no laws to support it. Truth survives re-examination. Truth survives questioning. Throughout history, only lies and liars have resorted to the courts to coerce adherence to dogma. More than anything else, it is the sheer legal force brought to bear that makes it look like there's something being hidden here. Somebody goes around saying he saw Bigfoot. He doesn't get arrested. Somebody claims to have seen Elvis getting a haircut in the downtown barber shop. Their career isn't destroyed. They're not blacklisted. Somebody claims to have been taken for a ride in a flying saucer. They don't have their career destroyed. Only in this one area of historical inquiry is so much political and legal might brought to bear so that you will not dare question what you are told to believe. And that's what these Holocaust denial laws are all about. Don't think, don't question, don't examine, just believe as we tell you to believe. Because beliefs are the chains used to hold free minds slaves. If you are brainwashed into allowing belief to control you, then those who control the beliefs control you. It's built into our society. We're bribed to allow belief to control us at a very young age. Believe in the fat man at the North Pole, you'll get toys. Believe in the magic Easter rabbit, you'll get candy. Don't think, don't question, don't analyze, just believe. Believe in the imaginary playmate, and you will never die. And those who control the beliefs are able to control you. Israel is terrified that one of the biggest hoaxes and frauds in all of history is coming unraveled. Science and time have caught up with them. Turns out that soap wasn't made from human beings, it was made from pigs. The lampshades crafted from human skin turned out to be goat skin. The Red Cross maintained offices on the premises of all of Nazi Germany's slave labor camps did not report mass exterminations. There were no mass graves at Treblinka. Ground-penetrating radar showed that the soil is in exactly the same way it was laid down by the last ice age. Time makes ancient truths uncouth, and science and technology have caught up with a lot of these lies and deceptions and frauds. Even the phrase Holocaust denial is a piece of propaganda, because what they're really upset about is Holocaust questioning. And again, any other area of knowledge, you go back, you take a look with new technology, new science to learn new things. When Bob Ballard found the Titanic, nobody was screaming about, oh, he's going to change the legend of the Titanic. Most of the witnesses claimed the Titanic sank in one piece. Obviously, that didn't happen, and the new science and new technology showed that. Nobody got upset about that. Nobody's political ox was being gored by it. But this rush to pass these laws against Holocaust denial is a flashing neon sign. Something is being hidden from you. And if it were something harmless like Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster's love child, nobody would care. But Israel's entire political relevance rests on the history of World War II. General Eisenhower didn't mention anything about a mass extermination of Jews in his autobiography, neither did Churchill. And you need to understand the why of this came around, and it's very simple. At the end of World War II, the founders of Israel wanted to go in and take Palestine for their very own. But that was exactly what the world had united to stop Germany from doing. Germany could not be allowed to simply walk into Poland and take it for his own use. And here the founders of Israel were asking the world to allow Israel to do to Palestine what Hitler was not allowed to do to Poland and France. And so Israel needed a propaganda device that was so powerful that all of the nations of planet Earth would say, well, we didn't let Hitler do it to Poland and France and Norway, but I guess we're going to have to let Israel do it to Palestine. And it was at that point the slave labor camps became extermination centers, insecticide delousing became gassing, and the whole story was just backed up and blown and fed to you by the media so that what Hitler could not be allowed to do to Poland, the Israelis had to be allowed to do to Palestine. We know now, because of the story of Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, that we are lied to manufacture our consent to policy. And there's no reason to assume that it's a new phenomenon. It's been done all along throughout history. Gigantic frauds that change world history. Donation of Constantine. Prester John. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. We have a legitimate right to always go back and make sure that what we're told is history is reasonably accurate and truthful. History is a joke played by the victors on the vanquished in front of an audience. Dares not laugh. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Fox News is out there screaming, the president must take action on Syria and chemical weapons. They're really pushing it. It's a full-court press. Got to go into Syria. Got to do this thing. Meanwhile, we're getting word that an American 747 cargo jet crashed on takeoff from Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. Now, the Aviation Herald is saying what appears to have happened is on the climb out from the airport, part of the cargo broke loose and slid backward. The plane pitched up and stalled and crashed. AP is claiming Taliban has taken credit for shooting down the 747. So it's a knee-jerk reaction. Something bad happens, oh, blame the evil Muslims for it. And they're out there doing that. We're going to go to the phones. Kyle in Philadelphia. Aloha, Kyle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. First of all, I just wanted to say that your speech about the Holocaust in Israel, I haven't looked into it enough to know what is and what isn't, but you really absolutely gave me something to think about with that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about what the bankers that you were talking with the gentleman before about. If anybody has any doubt about who these people are, all they need to do is look into Paul the Vulture Singer and what he did with GM Motors and Delphi in 2009 during the automotive bailout.
Yes.
You need to understand that these people, if they thought killing you, killing your family, making you suffer would net them a profit, they would do it without a second thought. They don't. Of course. This is not. I mean, people say this is just business. This is not business. This is personal. These people are actively out there trying to make a profit, picking the bones dry of America. And in a sense, you know, this is not a active shooting, fire, gun, bomb, missile war. This is a war. I mean, these people have declared war against us, and they will do whatever it takes to bring this country down.
Well, you know, if you go back and you look at my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, and how all these major wars of the 20th century are ultimately tied into these private banks extending their domain across the planet Earth, you have to come up to the fact that in exchange for keeping their little Ponzi scheme going, these bankers have gladly sent hundreds of millions of human beings to death and disfigurement. And from their point of view, it's just the cost of doing business.
Well, and I mean, to go back to Paul Singer, what he did buying Delphi at 69 cents and then going to the government and saying, listen, we will not produce any auto parts and we will crash the entire automotive industry unless you give us $12 billion, which might I add, we don't know exactly how much he got. He at least got $15 million, but Mitt Romney probably walked away with close to $150 million from that bill.
Well, I mean, right there, I mean, if taking that one example out of many, it should tell us that we cannot allow large corporations to reach a point where they're able to blackmail the U.S. government. And again, this gets back to this whole situation with Eric Holder saying we can't arrest any of the bankers. It would wreck the system as a whole. And if we're going to have a new civil government in this land after the present one is finished thrashing around, we have to make sure that there is nothing that is going to be able to take control of the nation away from we the people, whether it's a foreign government or the bankers or large food corporations or pharmaceutical corporations. They have to be kept subordinate to the will of the people. And we lost that in this country. We're not going to get it back. We're just going to have to be patient and wait for the present system to come crashing down. Okay, Kyle?
There's a video out there on YouTube, and it compares what the actual concentration of wealth in America to what Americans believe the concentration of wealth is.
I've seen that
video.
video. We've linked to it. It is amazing. Most Americans do not understand just how severe the wealth differential is in this nation. We're a nation of incredibly wealthy people sitting over the 99% who are being driven down below minimum wage. We were just talking about this trend for American employers to pay for a unit of work instead of by the hour. And the workers are getting shorted. They're making less than minimum wage on this deal. Okay?
And after seeing that video, realize that they're not happy yet. They're not satisfied. They don't have enough yet, in their opinion.
They can't be. They're addicted. This is addictive behavior. That's why we call them money junkies. And again, Bernie Madoff is a good example. Co-founder of NASDAQ, he had more money than any normal human being could spend in a lifetime, and it still wasn't enough. He had to set up his little Ponzi scheme and cheat his investors out of another $65 billion. And we need to recognize money addiction is just as destructive of society as heroin addiction or meth addiction or cocaine addiction or any of those other problems. It is a pathological, psychological illness, and we need to treat these people as being ill. We need to take them away from their addictive substance, lock them in a little happy home with rubber walls, and you let them, withdraw from their money addiction. But putting these, like I said, putting these bankers in charge of the nation's economy is on the same level as putting drug addicts in charge of the pharmacies. You're not going to get a good end result. Got to let you go. We're running out of time here. I got to grab another phone call. We're going to switch over to Alex in Texas. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Good afternoon, Mike. I was with my wife earlier, and we had heard a 22-year-old call into the show because we listened to it on our lunch break, her lunch break and my lunch time, and I just wanted to say that I'm very happy to know that the demographic of listenership that is listening to what really happened and this kind of information. I applaud all the young listeners, and I commend them for taking interest in their liberty and getting informed, because there's nothing more important or indispensable, you could say, as being informed about what's going on. And I just wanted to also tell you, we started a small little listenership of the podcast down in El Salvador with the American and British schools students that are out there. So
outstanding.
I just wanted to let you know that there's people listening to you, and young people listening to you, and one of the things that people like the most is the podcast that you have, that all wars are bankers' wars, and that, believe it or not, that's waking people up like it's going out of style.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, and I'm in agreement with you. I am absolutely delighted that we're starting to capture the youth audience here, because these kids, they're going to pay the price for our failures. And, if everything that we've uncovered about government lies and corporate media deceptions, dies with our generation, then it will have all been for nothing. But to just see all these kids who are waking up and paying attention, and they're doing their own blogs and their own posts, and they're joining the independent media, it is probably the biggest single reason for hope that we're going to get out of this dark age and into a better world somewhere in the future.
No, I totally agree, Mike. I mean, I started listening to you when I was 26. I'm now 32, and I got to tell you, it's been one of the most, it's been the most eye-opening experience I've had. I mean, I've learned more from you than I did, in the history of architecture in college, and I actually paid for that. And yeah, and I wish, and I know that I am a contributor to every independent media outlet, even Alex Jones, even though I don't really like him, but I am supportive. I believe it's the energy factor, the energy that you put into freedom will eventually pay you back, regardless of what channel it directs in specifically. But I just wanted to say that, Mike, and I wanted to just let all the young people know that I know that, we know that there's a lot of young people listening and paying attention, and at least keeping those transmitters from becoming infected by fear, and they're learning how to love each other, and we're learning how to engage rather than conflict. And I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Mike. Aloha to you, and you have yourself a great day.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Thank you for the kind words. And yeah, and this is a recent thing. For most of the early years of my blogging and radio show, the age demographic hovered around my own age, which is getting up there. But lately, in the last 2 years, we've been seeing that age demographic, that average age, starting to go down, and now it's really reaching down into the age group that really needs to know what's going on before they get sent off to die in another war to prop up the private central banks. And I am absolutely delighted every time I hear one of these teenagers come in, or these kids make a video in school about the Currency Act. They're getting it. They understand that the true nature of the United States is not what the schools are teaching them, that the reality of the world is not what corporate media is feeding them, and they're taking it on themselves to go out and find out for themselves what the facts are, and that is absolutely the thing that I most wanted to see happen. And so I'm very, very pleased about that. Alrighty, getting back to some the economic news. We're now getting some numbers about the derivatives exposure. And this is of concern because right now we're seeing a movement in Spain to simply eject the government and leave the euro. That would trigger defaults and these credit default swaps. A lot of people have been talking about J.P. Morgan's mind-boggling exposure in derivatives of $69.5 trillion, all in one lump, all on J.P. Morgan. It turns out there's actually a bank that has an even larger exposure to these European derivatives, and that is Deutsche Bank, at $72.8 trillion. And all of that is going to implode the instant any one nation in Europe defaults. And that's why they're grabbing savings accounts right now. We must protect the banks. We must protect the banks from default and the derivatives, because when it goes, it's all going to go from top to bottom. And again, looking at now, we have one of the directors of the Fed are saying, yeah, savings account looting, anything to save the too big to fail banks. No price is too great to pay to save the banks. You should only have as much money in the bank as you need to cover your immediate obligations. Keep the rest under your control. Put some of it into physical silver, physical gold. Hide it under the mattress. Bury it in the mayonnaise jar out by the pineapple plantation. Whatever. And obviously you don't want to tell your friends and neighbors that you've got cash and silver and gold at home. Kind of a dumb thing to do here. Now, we were talking the other day about how the U.S. government has gone out and spent your tax money to advertise for illegal immigrants to take advantage of the food stamp program. And they're sending out the message, don't worry, nobody will ask you for proof of citizenship. Just come on in and help yourself to the food stamps. And around here, the food stamp money is so short, it only lasts through the third week of the month. And that's why we're involved in this food basket program for a local elementary school. So these kids who are food insecure, is the euphemism, in the fourth week, they got something to eat. Because if they're not eating, they can't think, they can't learn. And they're advertising for the illegals to come on. Now, following on that story, where everyone's talking about the new immigration bill that's going to grant amnesty to illegal aliens, and there's going to be like 33 million instant legal workers in this country, it also turns out this immigration bill will also grant amnesty to those who employed illegal immigrants. There will be no prosecution for fake IDs or fake paperwork. So at a time when our government is telling us that we have to pay more taxes, they're demanding austerity, they're getting ready to Cyprus our savings accounts, employers who hired illegals took jobs away from legal citizens. These employers who did that did not withhold from the paychecks, did not pay employee taxes. They get a free ride. They're off the hook. What kind of a policy is this? It's certainly not one that is protecting the rights and the incomes of the legal American citizens. As I mentioned earlier in the show over at CBC, there is an article, it's Neil MacDonald. It's the start of a new series of documentaries called The Monarchs of Money. And they're actually going to this documentary about how the private central bankers have succeeded in taking direct control of every nation in which they have established a beachhead, if you will. And you need to understand something about the private central bankers. They don't see themselves as serving the community or the people or the nation. They are in business to make a buck. And they have seized control of the civil governments in furtherance of that goal. And that is why every single nation that has a private central bank issuing the public currency as a loan at interest is drowning in trillions of artificially created imaginary debt in order to control you. That's your new slave chain, that Federal Reserve note. It is ruled by compound interest. And it is no more legitimate a form of governance than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. The only legitimate form of governance is self-governance, and we lost that in 1913. Woodrow Wilson, who signed the Federal Reserve Act, wrote that in his own diary. We are no longer a nation of the majority opinion. We are a nation under the control and duress of a small group of dominant men. That was the beginning of our decline into fascism. Up there in Canada, they're starting to point that out. Let's see. Best economic analyst on the planet calls bovine excrement on the recovery. We know there's no recovery. They're just propping up the banks with instantly created money. And apparently, at the Federal Reserve meeting this week, they're going to announce a continuance of quantitative easing, buying $85 billion every month of bonds from the banks to keep them solvent. They're buying up all the toxic assets and dumping them on the American taxpayers. Over in Greece, their government just passed a bill which will end the employment for 15,000 state employees, all in the name of austerity. And what's really amazing is we understand now the entire spreadsheet and theory for austerity was flawed. The Excel sheet had mistakes, wrong assumptions, cells with important numbers weren't even linked into the equations. It was all just a gigantic bluff, and it is still shaping economic events all across Europe. And I'll tell you what's going to happen with Greece. It won't solve the problem because those 15,000 public employees will not find other private sector jobs to go to. And so Greece will come up short the same way Cyprus did following their austerity and their haircut. And they said, this will balance the books. Wrong. They're 17 billion euros short of balancing the books because all those public workers who were let go did not find private sector jobs to go to. So they're all unemployed. They're not paying taxes. They're not providing anything to the society. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And boy, these 3 hours have just flown by. I did not even get through half my talking points. We'll just have to take some of them into tomorrow. We have been talking about CISPA this online spying where the government wants to be able to simply monitor all of your electronic devices, read your email, listen to your phone calls, loot your computer, all the rest of this stuff. CISPA was passed by the House of Representatives. They were trying to link Boston, oh, they're online. They were reading those evil online blogs that were telling them how to bomb and kill Americans, which is nonsense, because none of the blogs they named have things like that on there. And so it turns out that CISPA will not even be brought to the floor of a vote in the Senate because it is doomed to fail out of privacy concerns. Well, that's not going to stop Obama. He's already implemented much of CISPA with executive action. Eric Holder's Department of Justice has already told telecommunications companies, ISPs, phone companies, cable companies, they will not be sued or prosecuted for privacy violations against American citizens. And now we're getting this very interesting story coming out of Russia today, where the FBI has written this legislation that is being introduced into Congress, where any U.S. company that refuses to turn over your private information on request without a warrant will have to pay a fine. So now they're coercing your ISP, your telephone company, your cable company into turning over whatever the FBI wants. We want to go in and see what's on the cloud for this person. We want to track this person's email. It will be done, even without the permission of the United States Congress. And it's all about scaring you into being silent, to not sharing with your friends and family through the social media your concerns about the disastrous course this nation is on. Because the reality is, with all their computers, the government can't keep track on the entire social media online content of 330 million Americans. It's just a scare tactic. And we know anybody who is a real terrorist isn't going to be using the social media. Remember when the Boston bombing happened, they said, oh, we're going to go back through the last 2 weeks of social media traffic and we're going to find the bombers. And they didn't. There was nothing there. And if there's anything Boston tells us, it's that all this surveillance really is useless. If you accept the official story of Boston, it tells us Department of Homeland Security has failed. TSA has failed. FBI has failed. CIA has failed. They're out there screaming, oh, it was intelligence failures. It was the same lame excuse after 9/11. They're trying to basically go on saying that even though this bombing happened, and I think it was the government who did it, please go on giving us your money for the security industrial complex. We'll try harder to make you safe. No, they won't. The next time they need a false flag incident, they'll make it happen. And afterwards they'll say, oh, it was an intelligence failure. We need more scanners and more whatever. And there is no way to surveil a population to such an extent that nobody can come up with a bad idea. But that's what they're aiming for. So my concern is that as the official story of Boston continues to crumble, they'll get out of this mess with a bigger, more bloody, more horrible bang to scare you back into supporting war with, well, whoever. I hear the music. It's time to get out of here. We got some errands to run. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please share with all your friends and family Republic Broadcasting. Share everything that you are learning here. Start to talk to people who are not yet plugged into the truth but are willing to listen. Don't waste your time on all those people who are paid to argue with you. There's a lot of them out there. Find the people ready to listen, ready to take the red pill and get them on board. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.